Good afternoon on this, I was going to say fresh February afternoon. Welcome one and all, and to all those online at the Cabinet meeting on Wednesday the 12th of February 2025. It's a big one about the revenue capital budgets, but as per usual, let's go through the agenda. So the agenda item 1 is apologies. I don't think we've had any official apologies, unless... but what I would say at this point, as the keen observers might have already spotted, we are down a cabinet member. That's Councillor Patrick Jewett, who offered his resignation about 2 weeks ago now for various different reasons that will remain private. But I want to put on record my thanks and the Cabinet's thanks to Councillor Jewett's hard work and dedication since entering his post. He's given it everything he's got, and we really appreciate that and thank him. So I want to put that on the record. In terms of the responsibilities he held, they will be temporarily divided up amongst the rest of the Cabinet, and those details will be forthcoming. As I have to inform the Cabinet of which ones they're getting as well. But that's a temporary measure. We will be installing a new Cabinet member in due course, just for the sheer amount of work that is coming our way, and also the critical items that Cabinet portfolio holds, particularly, say, anti-poverty. We needed a dedicated Cabinet member to focus on that strategy. I don't see any other comments on apologies, so we'll move to agenda item 2. Any declarations of interest? I don't see any, but if anyone, as we start to go through the paperwork, realises they should have declared one, please just say it there and then and we will record it. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, minutes from the January Cabinet meeting. Colleagues, are we content to move those minutes?
Happy to move.
Any seconders? Quite a few seconders. That's moved as a true record. Okay, on to the primary business of today's meeting. Agenda item 4, the revenue budget and final proposals after the consultation period that was triggered after the January Cabinet. This item is the key decision for this Cabinet, probably the biggest key decision for the Cabinet throughout the whole year. It's our final budget decision, our recommendations to the revenue budget and council rate to full council. To be clear, it's full council that approves the budget, not the Cabinet. We just recommend to the council, and the council decides what the actual budget is. We agreed the draft budget in January meeting, and today these are our final decisions and adjustments to that draft as outlined in January. As part of the process, as many of you will know, the draft budget goes to consultation, and that's been extensive in a variety of platforms that I will cover now. But we have consulted our schools, our unions, our school forum group, scrutiny committees. We've also engaged the public through our online consultation process. We used the local bus Wi-Fi network. All of us held ward meetings, so face-to-face briefing with residents to get their feedback. And we had several specific meetings on 2 proposals in particular, library and community centre proposals in those affected areas. Understandably, those attracted a lot of interest, and expected. We received a huge sway of representations from local community groups, which I and the Cabinet have reviewed, and I just want to put on record thank you to all those residents who signed petitions, engaged with the process, went to those meetings in a constructive way. We were genuinely listening to their views, and it was always a pleasure to see such passion from our residents about facilities they really care about, and that's such a joy to witness. We received 3,000 public feedback on the Council's online Wi-Fi process. I know the Cyllideb petition, I can see the Cyllideb councillors here, 4,100. signatures, which is a testament to them and to the community of Cyllideb. But also, we had representatives from Rogerstone, we had representatives from Tredegar Park, and I know Malpas as well, all passionate about their facilities. So I want to thank all of them for their engagement, because as we've always said, and we'll always continue to say, we are a listening council. It was a genuine consultation. You know, often I hear, oh, it's just a consultation, it's a foregone conclusion. It's not a foregone conclusion at all. So, as always, we always listen to the community's feedback. Before I list those changes, though, officially, I want to remind the basic shape of the draft budget that will remain unaffected. Firstly, as widely reported, we received the highest revenue budget grant from the Welsh Government across Wales, and this reflects the real pressure we have here in the city of Newport, which is growing rapidly. And just to emphasise this point, we got the most not because of the absolute generosity of the Welsh Government, although it is generous and we thank them, it's because of our population changes, primarily. Our under-16s is growing at over 10%. Our over-65s is growing over 14%. Our two biggest cost area pressures are social services and education, which roughly take up 2/3 of our budget. So the cost pressures and the growth we're seeing is in exactly the areas you expect to see huge cost inflation. So the Welsh Government recognised that. And, you know, just to put in that context, say for the under-16s, that growth is double of Cardiff. Cardiff is just running over just 5%. So we look to invest that money and what we raise through council tax to support those services and increase the services we offer that many of the public, I've heard over 9-10 months now, wish to have. So on to council tax, that we will stick with 6.7% council tax, which in cash terms, and this is important, Band C, that is £89.18 a year extra, or £1.72. For Band D, which is usually the average, although Band C's to A and A to C is the far majority of bands in Newport. Average Band D is £1.93 a week, or an extra £100.33. So I've noticed a lot of people like to focus on the percentages and try and compare it with inflation. They either don't understand maths or they're deliberately misleading people. That is like comparing apples and pears. They're completely different things. Percentages reflect the original number value. So it's important to put it in the context of what it actually means in your pocket. For that investment, and you know, £1.93 or £100 a year extra, we can, with that, along with the Welsh Government extra funds, start doing some of these things. And if anyone disagrees with us, that means they want to cut these things or not do them. And I look forward to that debate. School funding will increase by £11 million, an increase of 8%. School budgets will not be diluted as we have more children in our schools. We are giving schools extra funding for those. We are also providing extra funding to keep up with rising numbers of eligible children for receiving free school meals. We're also investing in support of our children with additional learning needs, nearly £600,000 over 2 years, so they receive the target and specific help and support in our schools. No savings are expected of our schools. No savings. And if you compare and contrast to many councils, and I speak to a lot of those leaders, they're cutting schools in cash terms. Homelessness and families and individuals. As many of you know, and we've never sought to hide it, housing is facing a huge pressure in Newport, mainly by the demographics we're seeing, but also just the sheer number of individuals arriving on our doorstep requiring support. It's a massive issue across the UK, not just Newport, but Newport is still heavily affected. We're usually housing vulnerable individuals, to be fair to say, or those with multiple difficulties, in themselves, but also securing accommodation that's safe for them and others around them. And we have a lot to do here, and in particular We're trying to find more appropriate types of accommodation to meet their needs and the community's needs, helping these families and individuals move into appropriate longer-term accommodation. And that remains a strong goal of this council now and in the foreseeable future. But there's costs to that, and the costs require us to invest an extra £1.8 million into our housing provision or revenue side to keep up with that demand and support. Like many councils, we've had to send some of our most vulnerable children outside of the area and sometimes outside Wales to receive the help and the care they need. This is becoming prohibitively expensive and isn't the best solution for the child nor the taxpayer. We're investing nearly £2 million extra in our children's social care services to develop residential provision in our close to the city, and nearly £1 million of developing local education provision for pupils with additional learning needs. In addition to this, I'm pleased to confirm that our investment will also ensure that our partners who provide residential care for our elderly residents will be funded to continue to pay the real living wage, so that the care sector here locally is supported. This is a significant investment for us. That's over £3.5 million. And I want to labour this point. That's extra money for our children's social care services and extra money for our adults' social care services, investing in the people that need the help the most. We've had to consider a range of significant cost pressures and investments in our budget 25-26, but it isn't all about just raising council tax. We've also, even with the council tax and even with the Welsh Government settlement as it was, we've still had to find savings, and I think we shouldn't skip over that point. It doesn't even still cover our cost pressure. We've still had to find nearly close to £5 million in savings. And they've been outlined. I think most of them ran through in October, and I'll move on to the ones today as well. But it's worth emphasising on the council tax. We're the third lowest council tax in Wales. And actually, we're proud of that. And where we can, we'll always limit council tax, because I agree with the residents. I prefer it in their pockets. I want them to have better holidays. I want them to have nice meals out. But equally, I want to look after their grandpa and grandma. Equally, that child that looked after child needs our care and support when they're, be honest, parents do not step up to the mark. Who's going to step up? This council, these officers, this Labour group. And if anyone disagrees with us, again, I welcome that debate and look forward to the council meeting. Turning to the budget here and now that hasn't been submitted in October, we need to allocate 600k on the revenue side. And as already said, we've invested already in services that matter to our residents and will deliver sustainable finances for the council. Vitally important, as we need to be sustainable as a council, but we appreciate services are often only felt by a relatively small number of residents, and we really want this to be a benefit to people as much as possible. So I will outline what I'm calling the bread and butter budget for our residents. So we've already noted our investments in schools, children's social services, adult social services. But for many residents who don't have a parent or a loved one, either in education or social services, they're often querying me, and I've heard it many a times, and I know cabinet members hear it all the time, what services do they get? And they want extra services, and I've been doing a lot of ward meetings, and not a single member of any political party said they want the council to do less. Not a single one. Never ever uttered those words. It's always, the council should be doing this, the council should be doing that, the council should be covering this. And I've listened to those conversations, because we're a listening council, and I'm a listening leader. So I'm pleased to announce the following. I've allocated the money, and we need to go through a formal process of going back to the Cabinet to clear the final decision on this, but reallocating the money to switch every other light back on, street light back on in Newport. That's 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. That is 140k into the revenue budget to help make this happen, and 320k from the prior year underspend to fund the changes themselves. So 140 to the ongoing revenue, 320 to start making those changes. And that is directly due to residents asking for that to be done. We also listened to the service opinions of our residents around community facilities. I've talked about the passion of Cyllideb and Malpas and Rogerstone. So we will save the libraries and the community centres. They will not save the money in those as originally drafted in the draft budget. All will remain unsaved. And I want to note, because we're making tough decisions on other areas. I'm also pleased to say, and I'm pleased councillors who are passionate about this subject, to start allocating some revenue funding to reopening public toilets across the city. And we're allocating 15k for this, and we'll be looking at options. Again, it has to go back to Cabinet about which toilets and what's the appropriate measures to have them open and where and so forth. And I hope that does recognise to those in this chamber that I do listen to their concerns. The other item that we're not going to proceed with is the Newport Matters saving. And if you actually look on the online consultation, the public were broadly supportive of actually making that saving. But when it came to the face-to-face feedback, when you met residents who maybe not necessarily online, they were far more supportive of Newport Matters and keeping it. And they felt it had changed over the last year. So thank you, Councillor Corton. That had been more informative and better for the residents. And the online would skew that Newport Matters consultation, in my view, in this Cabinet's view, because they're already online. They might not rely on that. But those residents who don't rely on online, who do like to read something and see what's happening, it's important to them, so we're going to keep it. And thank you to Councillor Corton and to the comms team for their incredible work in this area and for doing such an amazing job for those residents. Lastly, you might have come across this uncontroversial decision by UK government to increase national insurance. The cost to the council's direct staff is something we need to be cognizant of. The Treasury have committed in the public domain that they will fully fund this. We're going to take a more cautious stance in relation to that, and I think that's about prudence and being careful to make sure that is the case going forward. We are allocating 278k for that potential scenario where, if the Treasury do not fully fund it, we have some wiggle to try and cover some of it ourselves. Now, we don't know, there's too much uncertainty in this space. All we know what's in the public domain as it's a commitment to do so, but when we see it in hard numbers and actual figures, we will be more assured. But prudently, I think, and wisely, after speaking with the Finance Director, we should create some provision that if that doesn't transpire, we have an ability to cover some of it at least. So what else matters to our residents on a day-to-day basis? It's things like roads, bus shelters, and other stuff that people see in their day-to-day life when they leave their door and they get around and they do their own business. And already announced in the initial draft, but we're keeping and committed to, is the extra grass cutting across the city, which again, when I came into post, many residents were concerned by the grass cutting and the timely manner in which it was cut. We're going to invest in extra teams to go around and do the grass cutting of council-owned land. And I labour that point because lots of the land where the grass was growing too big, which I can understand why residents give hell to the council, is not owned by us and owned by mainly housing associations who we can't cut for them without the landowner's permission. And that can lead to a lot of confusion. But for land that the council owns and I'm sure there'll still be continuing confusion as we move into the year, we are going to commit extra resources. Now, I've been urging our RSL partners to do the same, but we can't guarantee it, but we hope they do. We'll also do extra street cleaning, which I announced in the initial draft budget in January. That's staying, of course, and again, that's from residents' feedback who want to see more done in their streets and cleaned on a more regular basis. So bear in mind more of these day-to-day bases that people want to see. I'm pleased to confirm we'll be looking at more announcements on some proposals in June, when we'll be able to confirm whether we have an underspend this year and the balance of the previous year's underspend resources that have not yet been allocated. This is on top of the investment we have made in our parks, led by Councillor Forsey, again funded from other budgets, including underspends. And we will always continue to invest in what matters to our residents: roads, bus shelters. I can say today that we are anticipating receiving an additional £4 million of capital for our capital resource to use on our infrastructure. That is roads, resurfacing, pavements, and is as additional funding from Welsh Government, which we are really grateful for. In the meantime, to support this budget, we'll be allocating £1.9 million of prior underspend to fund the development of our increased local provision of childcare in the city, as plus and part of our Eliminate initiative. We are hoping that Welsh Government funding will be made available for this, but in order to start this development, we need to fund it here and now, which I'm committing to. We'll pick this up in June announcement if Welsh Government will fund these as it releases more funding for our bread and butter initiatives. So, summing up, we're delivering the bread and butter budget. More for our roads, more for our bus shelters, more for our children's services, more for our grass cutting, more for our street cleaning, more for the issues that people see day to day in their lives. And they want to understand what their council tax is going on. And they want more, and we're going to give them more. And we'll be announcing more in June to support that endeavour. And the June announcements will be key for our infrastructural piece. We are a growing city. Our infrastructure is on a much strain, so we'll be announcing what I hope to be more significant investments in that area. So we've made our choices. We'll put those choices to full council. As a society and in a community, we can't ignore the support we need to provide to those who are most vulnerable. And also whilst we can, to support our children in our schools, including those with additional learning needs. But also, as I said, we're very mindful of day-to-day stuff that matters. And I've outlined some initiatives here that make a difference to everyone. And I will be very pleased to announce more in June. Thank you. Colleagues. Councillor Davis.
I'm going to sit. I feel strange sitting in this room, but I'm going to sit. The Leader and I are still in the process of visiting every school in Newport and are about a third of the way through and still a good way to go. Very interesting experience, but we have certainly met some inspirational head teachers and outstanding teaching staff who are all focused on making a difference for our children in Newport. What has become transparently clear that this has been against a background of 14 years of austerity and schools have struggled. And that's also against a background of increasing pupil populations, creating that additional pressure, with children also being diagnosed with increasing additional learning needs. Dimitri promised last summer that funding to schools would not be cut, and this translates to £11.1 million investment in our schools, protecting school budgets and improving ALM provision with an additional £600,000 being identified to be spent on increasing needs. Our children in Newport matter, and we want them to have the best start in life, and everything we do as a council truly reflects this, from our wellbeing objectives to our intention to address increasing ALM needs, and that we can see with the planned expansion of Ysgol Bryn Derw, opening this September with 44 additional places. Our new Welsh medium provision in Pearl will also have an LRB, as well as the new school that we are planning to open in Llanwern in September 26. It's worth noting that as well as this, as well as providing an LRB, there'll be 444 new places for children to access most medium language in Isgo and Gwentley. We are aspirational for our children and are not cutting core funding, whilst we're seeing some of our neighbouring authorities having to agree to this financial challenge. We are listening to our parents, teachers and our children, and our delivery on what children are telling us is what's needed. But of course, to facilitate this, with the pressures of new schools, increased funding, I have to support the recommendation of a council tax increase of 6.7%, remaining, as we do though, the third lowest council tax in Wales. I very much welcome the proposed lights being switched back on, the saving of our libraries and community centres, revenue for public toilets, keeping Newport matters, and extra grass cutting as well as street cleaning. We can justify a 6.7% increase when residents will see those things that matter to them being tackled and addressed. As the leader says, it's this bread and butter budget for what people say matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Colleagues, Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Leader. I'd just like to add my full support to the budget recommendations. I think after many difficult past budgets as a consequence of austerity policies, how refreshing to have a settlement from Westminster that has enabled our budget for investment. As Cabinet Member for Assets and Infrastructure, there are a few points I'd like to underline again here, as you've already covered. First and foremost, not one single library or community centre will be shutting. Having attended the consultations on Tredegar House Library in my own ward, I know the general strength of feeling about our libraries. I know how precious they are to our communities. It's a place for a young child to discover and explore a love of reading. It's a social hub. It's a refuge. We'd be in a position to reopen certain public toilets. We know what a big difference this can make to people's experience, for example, of a day out in the park. They aren't cheap to maintain anymore, we all know that, but this investment will make a big difference. There's going to be, as just mentioned, a significant investment in the resurfacing of our roads and pavements. £4 million. That's the highest allocation in over 10 years. Last year, with half the allocation, we were able to resurface 10 roads, which was fantastic. But with this new allocation, we can roll out a very significant resurfacing programme and say goodbye to the potholes, hopefully. That's on top of additional investment for bus shelters, which is fantastic. We have heard a lot of inquiries about that. So that's a wonderful thing that we're able to now give. And, of course, having the streetlights back on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. As stressed in the opening by Dimitri, this is a positive budget. Now, I'm sure in some quarters it will be spun. I have no doubt of that. But what I'd ask the residents of Newport is look at what is being proposed here. That's really important. Look at what is being proposed here. And that will be at full council at the end of this month. And make up your mind. Not with someone who will always have negativity. Look at the positivity in what has been proposed by the Leader and his Cabinet. I must touch on community centres and libraries. It was good to see democracy at work. The proposal was out there. Councillors, and I know my own ward, but I've got to mention the Cyllideb councillors, spoke to the residents, held a meeting with the residents in their wards, and this is the outcome, because we're a listening council. And that's what really we're here for, to listen. And I have to touch on my own ward. I sat on a meeting, I must stress I sat on a meeting just to listen. And you had Councillor Cochrane on there from Shaftesbury, you had Councillor Trevor Watkins on there from Tredegar Park, but also you had my ward, Malpas Community Centre, on there, who was represented by Fiona, Nicola and Ian. And it was a really open and honest conversation, and I was very proud of their passion they put in for their local community centre. And the officers recognised that. And now I believe it's been arranged that officers will come out and meet all community centres. It's a massive positive. As the leader has said, we are a listening council supporting the residents in Newport. Keeping libraries and community centres, more grass cutting, more bus shelters, improved roads, improvement of roads, improved lighting, more street cleaning, open public toilets. I can go on. So what I would ask, one thing from the residents of Newport: if you believe this is correct, if you believe this is a positive step forward, not perfect, we understand, but a positive step forward, I urge you to speak to your local councillors, no matter what ward you are in, and get them to support this proposal in full council meeting on the 25th of February. Doesn't matter what ward, what political party, get them supported, because this is right for the people of Newport. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Clark. And it'd be interesting to see what those other councillors do when if they vote against this budget. They're against streetlights then. They're against reopening of toilets. They're against resurfacing of our roads and creating this financial space for that. They're against more investment in our bus shelters. And we need to start explaining that to people. Councillor Lacey.
Thanks, Leader. A couple of areas I wanted to just go over. Councillor Clark just mentioned about us being a listening council, and myself personally, in the last week, have met with some members of the Newport Carers Forum and also Newport Autism Support Group. The Carers Forum, we met along with the senior officers. That they had some reservations about one of the proposals that we were putting forward with regards to the reallocation of beds, but we listened to what they were saying, and we've got the time for our residents, and we've listened to them on a bigger scale, obviously, with the community centres and the libraries, but meeting with 3 or 6 groups of people, we as councillors, as cabinet members, we will do that, and we listen to what is important. Obviously we're asking for the 6.7% increase, and I've seen a lot of comments on the consultation that we shouldn't do that, but what this allows us to do is to reinvest into the services that have been decimated over the last 14 years. The services, the bread and butter issues, as you said, the potholes, the lights, the grass cutting, the things that people want to see, the things that we've seen in the last few years where we've been cutting. We've been increasing council tax, but we've also been cutting. This year we're increasing council tax, but we're reinvesting, and that reinvestment can be seen for all residents. But most importantly, in my areas, as you've just said, the money going into the children's homes in this city, so we can bring our children, our most vulnerable children, back into the city, back in to be looked after by this council, is so important, not only from a financial point of view, but from an outcomes point of view. They're looked after in their city. Another area which I'm highly passionate about, which is the additional learning needs, which the Deputy Leader has already discussed. Putting money into that area is just the start of a roadmap of improving our outcomes for our additional learning needs children, whether they be in schools like Ysgol Brynderw or in learning resources based or in mainstream education, as my daughter is. It's really important that we start investing into our future, into our younger generations, and this is so important. I think, I'm really supportive of this, as you said, in money into my adult social services as well. The two areas, the youngest and the oldest, where we don't actually get that council tax from, we're looking after these people that people wouldn't see. And also, Deputy Leader, which you've spoken about previously, for those people that can't afford that 6.7%, that don't earn enough, we do have that relief, the council tax relief that they can apply for, and a lot more will fall into that when that increase goes up. So, we don't want to put the money up, but allowing us to do this allows us to invest heavily back into our services. So I'm fully supportive, and I hope it goes through next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. It's worth bearing in mind, again, £1.93 a week, £100.33 over a year, and you get all this back. So I look forward to the others suggesting what they would have and what they would cut. And I look forward to them being honest about what they would cut. Councillor Corton.
This is very strange. Thank you, Leader. This is my first budget as a Cabinet member, so it's the first time I've been involved right from the off, and I tried to look at everything through the lens of people like my mum and people on the council estate that I was brought up on, and think about the everyday issues that impact them, you know, the way we communicate, the way we share information. I'm really glad Newport Matters is staying, because that means we can continue to talk to people who don't want to muck around in the mess that is Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I wish I had that option. But I think about those issues for people who work shifts, you know, and who come home when the lights have been off, or go to work when the lights have been off. And that's important to consider that, and to think about the other things that matter to them. Bus shelters, you know, they rely on public transport, pavements. All this budget addresses all of those everyday issues that matter to everyone. And I think it's really, really good that we could be in this position to invest in our city again. And let's make no bones about it, if it wasn't for the largest ever settlement coming to the Welsh Government from the Labour Government in Westminster, we wouldn't be here making these announcements today. And we really should recognise the change a Labour Government is bringing to our doorstep here in Newport. And I look forward to bringing this to full council. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. It's a very good point. Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Leader. Just on 2 points, obviously the housing investment, you know, 1.8 million. Again, we can't take things for granted. It's a drop in the ocean. However, that commitment in itself, you know, with this very scarce resources that we have, I'm sure all the residents will welcome. It's a great investment. On the topic of public toilets, I know many councillors off and on the record have actually approached me as a portfolio holder for public toilets, and again, not just for tourists, but those that are those residents who are vulnerable, who are, you know, pedestrians and do not have access to toilets. That just shows you that, again, we are not just a listening council, but we are actively listening to the public and their needs. Yeah, just want to say the council, local authorities do not have a duty, so to speak, in terms of, you know, maintaining public toilets directly. However, that just shows you, you know, the commitment that we are serving the public very greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dan. Councillor Bossy.
Thank you, Leader. Over the consultation period, we've heard from many people about what community centres mean to them. Activities in our community centre range from fitness classes, specific interest groups, children's play and older people's groups. The community centres are valuable, not just because of the range of activities, but because of the social value of people meeting friends, making new contacts and being part of a community. Residents have told us how they feel about their community centres in petitions and meetings, and we have listened. The Tredegar House petition had over 400 signatures, the Rivermead petition over 1,000, and the Cyllideb petition over 4,000 signatures. Residents also attended public meetings in large numbers, with around 50 attending Tredegar House, 55 or so attending the Rivermead Centre, and a fantastic 170 attending in Cyllideb. Community centres were severely affected in the COVID period, and although they have recovered, they've not moved forward. We need a modernisation in the way our community centres are run, with more information on the website to encourage use, to advertise the existing activities, an online booking system to make booking easier, and we need longer opening hours with availability at weekends. I hope we will find someone to drive forward the development of our community centres to cement their place in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey, for those strong and powerful words. Members, can I get a proposer? A seconder? Councillor Dan and Clark. I look to the legal officer. Is that take a vote for the budget proposals to council? I look forward to the debate at full council. Agenda item 5, which is the capital strategy and treasury management strategy. This is our report, as I just outlined, for the capital in 25-26. It's an annual report focusing on the capital's capital and expenditure plans, the financial impact of those in terms of borrowing and our investment strategy for the year. It's important to note that the full council ultimately approved the borrowing limits and prudential indicators contained within the report. However, as we as Cabinet are requested to approve the detailed capital programme itself and recommend the report to Council for approval. So just like the Revenue, Council has final say. It's also important to note the Governance and Audit Committee have also considered the report in their most recent meeting and have endorsed those proposed strategies with no concerns raised, although noting the demand for capital resources will increase the Council's capital financing requirements. In terms of the report itself, there are a number of key points to draw Cabinet's attention to as follows. The 5-year capital programme is now managed on a rolling basis, meaning that a new year, 29-30, has been added to the programme. The programme itself continues to reflect the challenging financial circumstances we are working within, and as such continues to comprise ongoing and previously approved schemes, as well as annual sums for activities such as asset management, asset maintenance and fleet renewal. The capital programme includes the addition of Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and the Cabinet are required to approve these as an additional to the capital programme. Because of the affordability challenges, new borrowing that is included within the strategy for the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme and a small amount of new borrowing with the capital headroom, which was agreed as part of 24-25 capital strategy. This means that the capital headroom, which is used to pursue new schemes or address cost increases on existing schemes, is quite limited. As a result, careful prioritisation will be required when making new commitments from the headroom, and every opportunity will need to be taken to boost it via one-off sources so that we can continue to respond to emerging pressures as and when they rise. In terms of Treasury management, the report details Council approach to borrowing and investing. It confirms the Council is committed to being a net borrower over the life of the proposed capital programme. In particular, a significant increase in the need to borrow is projected to the 25-26 financial year. It also confirms that Council will still pursue an internal borrowing strategy by using available cash resources to defer external borrowing for as long as possible. But this capacity will reduce them faster than assumed in previous strategies. It's worth noting at this point, I might say, other groups might want to notice that if you take money from reserves, we're going to have to borrow more. The Council also has some sizable loans which are due to mature in the short term, meaning that some new borrowing will be required simply to maintain the status quo. The Council may undertake borrowing in advance of need where there is a clear financial rationale for doing so. For investing, the Council will continue to prioritise security, liquidity and yield in that order, and will strike an appropriate balance between risk and return. A minimum investment balance of £10 million is required, which is currently being met via 3 covered bond investments and will continue to be the case for the next few years. Therefore, I ask the Cabinet to recommend to full Council for approval the capital strategy for 25-26, the borrowing limits needed to deliver the proposed programme, the Treasury management strategy and the prudential indicators included within it, the investment strategy and the MRP policy for 25-26, the details of which are set out in Appendix 1 for people to peruse at their own leisure. Cabinet are asked to note the increasing debt and corresponding revenue cost of this, including in delivering the rolling capital programme and the implication of this over both the short and medium term, increasing level debt and its impact. Colleagues, any comments on the capital programme? Great. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Can we vote for? That is duly passed. And I believe that's the end of the Cabinet meeting for today. Thank you for in attending. Oh, the work programme. How could I forget the work programme? I know the Cabinet to note the Cabinet work programme and are the Cabinet content with that work programme. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for your attendance. Look forward to seeing it for Council.